Commission meeting of Tuesday, April 17th, 2018. Let the record show that we have one commissioner absent. Mrs. Trustum. First item up is the order of business. Are there any changes to the order of business, Mrs. Carlson?
President Decker, no, there is no changes to the order of business.
There are no changes. Any questions for Mrs. Carlson? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the order of business.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion on the order of business? Hearing none. All in favor of the order of business, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. The order of business is approved. Consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that commissioners would like to discuss?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion to approve consent
Second.
in a second. Any further discussion, questions? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Consent agenda is approved. We have 4 timetable items tonight, but we'll go right into the non-timetable. And the first item up is a public hearing on Chapter 4, Alcohol Beverage Code Amendment for concessions. Mrs. Murtha?
Thank you very much, Mr. President, members of the Commission. With regards to the concession license, this is up for a second reading this evening. As noted at the last meeting, when the draft was presented to you, I indicated that there would be changes between the first and second reading to fine-tune the presentation of the ordinance to you. And so I wanted to go over those changes with you and also let you know that as part of the discussion process for this ordinance, we recognize that it is unique from other liquor licenses because it is specifically identifying the location of where this license would be granted. That is, it is limited by location to the ballpark. That does not restrict this ordinance from being amended in the future. However, it seemed appropriate since it was with regards to a specific location that was not in fact owned and operated by the city, but by the Dickinson Parks and Recreation District, to reach out to them and have a conversation with them about this liquor license. So I did reach out to Mr. Kramer with the Dickinson Parks and Recreation District and ask their thoughts with regards to the concession license. And specifically, I wanted to have an understanding of the contractual relationship between the vendor and the Parks and Rec District. And he provided me some background. He indicated that there was no objection from Parks and Rec, and in fact, that their agreement, there's 2 of them, one for the leasing of the space as well as a second agreement for vendor services, did indicate the ability to pursue an alcohol beverage license. And so that was very helpful, and I just wanted to convey that to the Commission members that conversation did in fact take place. I also indicated to them that this particular ordinance was being modeled after a similar ordinance found in the Bismarck Municipal Code with regards to concession type activities, and he indicated he was familiar with that and that made sense basically. To him. And so in looking at this particular concession license, at the first reading, it was for beer only. At that first reading, the Commission members expressed an interest in expanding it to include beer and wine, so that change has been made, so it is for a beer and wine concession license. It is to permit the sale of retail beer and wine to the operators of the food and beverage concessions under contract with the Dickinson Parks and Recreation District for concession services at Dakota Community Bank and Trust Ballpark. And then goes through the entire official name, and then thereafter specifically referred to as Ballpark to shorten it up. So this is only available to, I should say, organizations under contract with the Dickinson Parks and Recreation District for vendor services at this location. This does not limit the number of potential vendors. As you'll notice, the plural S, should Dickinson Park and Recreation have, I don't know what their contractual preferences are, but should they have multiple vendor contracts, they would be eligible for this concession license. Should you expand the list of locations for this license, that too would be taken into account. So this is not limited to one vendor, it's just limited to the contract holder. So if there's more than one contract, there's more than one possible applicant. The license would be non-transferable. It can be held by only the operators who have been awarded and hold the concession contract. And only, again, provided that the contract permits the sale of beer and wine. It is anticipated that with the application process, the city would review that contract to verify that particular point. And it may be held only for the period of the operator's concession contract and will terminate with the termination of that contract. So it will, for the period of the contract, and end with the contract. It cannot continue on absent that contractual arrangement with Parks and Rec. It's limited to on-sale service only to patrons of the ballpark, and the end sentence just indicates that the license shall comply with all of the laws of the state and remaining provisions of the code relating to the sale and dispensation of alcoholic beverages. That is important so that it's recognized this is not a carve-out, but has to work in concert with the other requirements of the code, and that includes the Sunday permit, which in your code in this chapter requires that if you wish to sell alcoholic beverages on Sundays, you have to have a separate permit for that sale. Every license holder does if they wish to do that. So that is an additional permit that would be required for this licensee as well, should they want to sell alcohol on Sundays. That concludes my presentation of the second reading of the ordinance and the changes therein, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions for Attorney Murtha?
Just a quick question, the concessionaires that would take at the Dakota Community Bank ballpark, are they at profit or not for profit?
I believe representatives are here in the from the vendors are here in the audience and could better answer that question.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor, members of the commission. We are, the Expedition League is a for-profit entity.
Okay, thank you.
Just for the record, could you just state your name?
Oh, Steve Wagner.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Attorney Murtha? I know we had the public hearing on the ordinance, the first reading, but since it's changed, I'd like to open it up to the public. If there's anybody from the public, they have any comments or concerns, please come forward, state your name.
President Decker and Commissioners, I'm Bernie Marsh from the Esquire Club downtown. The only question I have is, what's the cost going to be to whoever the concessionaire is for this, like the yearly license fee?
$550, if I'm correct.
I think it's a good idea.
I can just add that the fee schedule amendment is down on the agenda, so that is up for consideration.
I was
for the
correct
commission.
with that, right? 550?
Yep.
Yes.
$550.
Anyone else from the public? You want to come forward, state your concerns or comments to the commissioners? Seeing no one else from the public, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, any more questions for Attorney Murtha or staff members? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion on this ordinance 1649.
Make a motion to approve second reading and final passage of ordinance 1649.
A motion to approve
Second.
with a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. 1649 is passed. We'll move on to the next item, microbrewery and distillery license.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the commission. This would be a first reading of a proposed ordinance to amend the definition of a microbrewery, relating to a microbrewery license, which is currently existing under your code, as well as add a new license class for a distillery license. The proposed ordinance is before you. I can tell you that the language being used is brought to you and modeled after the Fargo Municipal Code's language with regards to microbreweries and distilleries. I wanted to first speak to the changes to the microbrewery license definition. And this reflects the fact that under state code, a microbrewery is defined as a vendor or provider, somebody who brews and dispenses up to 10,000 barrels or less of beer per year and sells beer produced or manufactured on the premises for consumption. There is actually a separate definition between 10,000 barrels to 25,000 barrels, and that is a beer tap room license. And so your license category or definition didn't have that, the specific number related to barrels and less, so that is the reason it is being added now. If recognizing that there is a difference between 10,000 or less and between 10,000 and 25,000, if you wish to add another category of license, that for a tap room license, that can be done as well. But I just wanted to make that clarification and bring it to your attention that technically a microbrewery is 10,000 or less. Then the distillery license is a new category, and this refers to a licensee who has the authority to distill spirits, again, on premises for on or off sale, and again, in accordance with the requirements of state code. So there is a very specific set of requirements for distillery licensees. They have to receive permission from the state, and they have their own set of requirements. The Fargo, much like this code does, the Fargo Municipal Code referred back to state code and essentially incorporated all of the requirements which the distillery would be subject to anyway, because it's required by state code, and that is the way this definition is phrased. And again, both licensee categories add the provisions that the requirements are that they'll comply with not only all state laws, but also all of the other requirements under the city code which are applicable. I would, not relating to this particular ordinance, but I will just note that later on down in your agenda, you will have a zoning ordinance amendment and for a second reading, and those zoning ordinance amendments also include incorporating and recognizing as a permitted use microbreweries and distilleries in various zoning categories. So this is intended to complement that zoning amendment. That is my summary, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Any questions for Mrs. Murtha?
So a tap room license is still beer they produce, but it's up to 25,000 barrels?
Yes.
I didn't realize there was a difference, I guess.
In North Dakota law, we don't have any rules like Montana where they can only serve 2 pints and they're cut off. And
There is some rules related to the distilleries about capping the amount.
Okay.
But again, that's
Century Code.
Century Code, yes.
Okay. I was just wondering if we had a rule like that, so.
Microbreweries apparently have more flexibility.
Okay. Any other questions for Mrs. Murtha? The ordinance number, is it 1650?
Oh, I'm apologize. As I go back a screen, I believe it is
1654.
1650?
Move to approve ordinance 1650.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, 1654.
Okay.
I have to have a public,
1654.
we have to have a public hearing first.
Oh, it's,
Oh, and we'll have to do a public hearing before
Yeah.
the motion. So, anyone with any concerns or questions, please come forward. I'll open up the public hearing. Looking that there are no questions or concerns on 1654, now I would entertain a motion.
I just have one more question. So for somebody to do a full bar service and a microbrewery, they would have to have 2 licenses? Is that my understanding? So like a restaurant license would have, plus a microbrew license?
Yes, so the distinction is the activity of actually brewing the beer on the premises is what the microbrewery license is getting at.
Okay. I'm done now.
Any other questions?
Move to approve first reading ordinance 1654.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. 1654, first reading is approved. We'll move on to the fee schedule. Attorney Murtha?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the commission. This is a resolution to amend the fee schedule to reflect the additional license category for the beer and wine concession license. The proposed fee is $550 for an annual license fee. It is less, I'll just highlight that for you, it is less than some of your other license fees. Currently, the lowest one is $700 for a beer-only license fee. The reduction in the amount from $700 to $550 was intended to reflect that the activities at the location would not be all year round, but limited in duration, and that was the reason for the for proposing the fee reduction. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Any questions for Mrs. Murtha? Hearing no questions, I will open up the public hearing. This is the first reading of ordinance 1655.
Oh, I'm sorry, resolution.
Okay, it's on ours, is it?
Oh.
The former's resolution.
I apologize. That should indicate it is a
Okay,
resolution to amend the fee schedule.
okay. So then this is 10/2018, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, this is resolution 10/2018. Would look for a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve 10/2018.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Resolution 10-2018 is approved. Next up, we have the Odyssey Theater Purchase Agreement. Attorney Murtha.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the commission. At the last commission meeting, this item was brought before you for consideration and approval, and at that time, my recollection of the meeting was the commission expressed a desire that the earnest money be non-refundable. That information and desire was conveyed to Odyssey, and a draft was provided to them. They came back and requested clarification and a slight modification from a flat non-refundable fee requirement to indicate that in the event there is a breach by the city or clean title was not, or the city was unable to convey a clean title, that under those circumstances, that the earnest money be returned to the proposed buyer, but in all other events would be with the proposed seller in the event the purchase agreement was not finalized for any other reason. It's my understanding that individuals representing Odyssey Theater are present in the audience today, and if they'd like to come forward to speak to the agreement, I would invite them.
Gentlemen?
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, my name is Brian Sieve. I represent Odyssey's development effort in Dickinson here, and we came, Steve Tripp, our president, is here as well, but we're here to answer any questions that you may.
Any questions for Mr. Steve?
I think the changes have kind of addressed the things that we were most concerned about. I mean, the only way really now is if the city would back out, or if there'd be no title we could convey because of some reason. I guess I don't have any issue with that. I mean, I don't think we're gonna back out, but
And I actually think the title commitment did come through today. So one of the big issues in the holdup was the property didn't have an abstract, and it took the title company some time to create the abstract before they could issue an opinion on the title, and that actually came through today. It was one of the big holdups in this whole process. So now that that is largely been complete, there really isn't anything that's at this point is going to hold things up. The architectural and engineering plans are a good 50% of the way done. We'll be presenting additional details to the public here shortly, but in terms of the downtown development district ordinance, I think after reading through this, we will meet and easily exceed any of your requirements as far as the architectural appearance, the fit, uniformity, building presentation, aesthetic, pleasantness, use of materials, those types of things. So, we look forward to coming downtown.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for staff or comments on this purchase agreement? If not, I would look for a motion.
Ordinance number?
I think we're just approving the
Yeah.
contract, so.
I'd move to approve, Mr. President.
We have a motion to approve the purchase agreement
second.
with a second. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Purchase agreement is approved. We have a few minutes. Mrs. Nominick? Our hiring journal.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. Top of our list is police officer. For positions, right now we have 2 openings and we have 2 people in the background phase. We had an administrative lieutenant position internally, and that was filled by Lieutenant Mike Hannell, I'm sorry. We have had a internal position for patrol sergeant that was filled with Brandon Stockey. We have an animal control officer we've had some difficulty filling. We've had that open several times, and we are looking at the job description now. May do some revisions with the job description. We had a full-time records clerk position that has been filled recently. Fire lieutenant was a promotional internal position. We had 3 people promoted to fire lieutenant. We have an advanced computer technician that was a new position for us this year, and we did fill that position, and he is currently working for us. We recently have a computer technician position that has opened up, so that has just been opened this week. Street and fleet manager position has been open for a while. We are just kind of on hold on that one. Street maintenance operator, we currently have 1 position open for that. We had a cataloging librarian position open up, and that was filled with one of our limited hour librarians. So therefore we have a limited hour library position that is just opened. We, as you know, just opened up a position for a solid waste recycling and collections coordinator. That position actually closes today, so we will begin the interview process next week. I believe it's the week after. Then we have several seasonal positions that we're trying to fill right now. We have 2 seasonal water positions. The museum is going to hire 3 tour guides and a preparator, a fossil preparator. So we have 4 positions in the museum. Street maintenance will have 3 to 4 positions there. Buildings and sites, we have 5 positions to fill. We've been lucky that quite a few of our seasonal public works employees are returning this year, so we have probably about half of them to fill this year. And then we're going to open an animal shelter seasonal position. to help us out there. In forestry, we've got 3 positions in forestry to fill seasonally. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Any questions for Mrs. Nominee?
Just one, I see you jumped past city forester.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did. We are still kind of in the interview phase on that. We have made an offer, and we're giving that individual some time to think about it. So,
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
okay, thank you.
We have a 4:55 timetable, and it is an invitation from DSU. We have a DSU rodeo captain present.
Hello, my name is Jamie Mullins, and I'm a saddle bronc rider on the Dickinson State Rodeo team.
And I am Jamie Derflinger. I'm a barrel racer.
We're just here to formally invite you guys and the rest of the city to our rodeo, which is coming up May 5th and 6th. I believe that's a Saturday and Sunday. It's been moved, so just take note of that. But we just want to get the invitation out there and get the public involved and stuff like that. Make sure we're growing this rodeo now that it's on those different fairgrounds out there. We just want to see a lot of people there. Both of our men's and women's teams are doing really well this year, so we could really use the support and enjoy to see you guys out there.
You said this event will be held where?
This will be held out in the
The
they're
new
like,
Stark County Fairgrounds.
yeah.
The Stark County Fairgrounds.
Yep.
Okay.
And you said the 5th and 6th.
Yep, 5th and 6th of May.
How many different universities participate?
I think there's about 15.
Okay, so quite a few participants, and
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's also, there'll be May 5th and 6th, so there's a 1 o'clock performance on that Saturday, and a 6 o'clock performance that night, and then on Sunday at 2 o'clock will be the short go, which is the top 10 people in each event that have made it that far. So, and our rodeo is the year-end rodeo, which means it all kind of comes down to that. That's when last-minute points are made and stuff like that to see where people, or how many people are going to make it to the CNFR and stuff like that in the summer. So
Is this the first rodeo at the new fairgrounds for you guys?
second,
Second.
yep, it's actually second. We had a great rodeo last year and ended up winning rodeo of the year out of our circuit. And that's out of 10 rodeos. We ended up with the best at the first time we had that rodeo at those fairgrounds. So it's a really great time, and people really enjoyed it.
good.
Wonderful.
Well, I invite the public to go out and watch our local college athletes as they participate and make their way to possibly the big rodeo. And the big rodeo is it in Wyoming?
Casper, Wyoming.
Okay, Casper. Okay.
I also like to add that there's a drawing contest for kids. You can find the sheets either if your kids go to Kids Day on the farm at DSU, they hand them out there. There's also, I believe, a printout on the DSU rodeo page, which is pretty easy to find on Facebook. You can get your kid one of those, you can fill them out, and then there's like a raffle for a bunch of bikes and stuff like that. And it's a great little ordeal. It's great for the kids. And last year we had a ton of kids show up and gave away quite a few bikes, and they all seem to like it a lot. So.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a couple of minutes before our next timetable. Deputy City Administrator Carlson, you have a thank you note?
Thank you, President Decker and members of the commission. Yes, we have 2 thank you notes, one from the Imagination Library and the other one from the RSVB program. And these were both participants in our Dickinson Subsidy Grant Program.
Mrs. Carlson, could you explain our program a little bit to the public, just so they know?
The Dickinson Subsidy Grant Program is run through our commission budget, and we budget for an amount that around about $100,000 per year. And then what it is there's an application, and for members of around the city that are looking for donations and to help out with their operations, and it's got to be like more of a brick mortar type thing. can't just be for operations or insurance or things like that. So this is what we have the applicants, and we had, actually, we had 9. We had 9 last year, and we had 11 this year that applied.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Carlson? Thank you. We'll move to our 5 o'clock, and we have a representative from Senator Hoven's office. Is she present?
I'm not sure if she's here or not. It was going to be Miss Sherry Buck, and she is a, she did send me her introductory sentences, but I just do not see her in the audience yet.
Well, maybe if she does show up, maybe the weather held her up a little.
That's what I was thinking.
We'll fit her in once the other timetable items.
All right, thank you.
We'll move on to engineering. Mr. Kubis, task order for KLJ.
Yes, thank you, Commission President Decker and Commissioners. This is what we call an MSA task order, or a Master Service Agreement. We've had several of these in place over the years with KLJ and with Apex. This one is a renewal with KLJ, who we initially entered into a Master Service Agreement back in 2013, renewed it in 2015 and 2017. And the form that's being used is what they call the EJCDC documents, pretty standard engineering agreements that we use with 3 of our local consulting firms here, KLJ, Apex, and Highlands Engineering. The reason we're doing this one kind of midstream, you see we've done it in odd years in the past, is there's a new form of this agreement out. I don't think there's much substantial changes. We actually just reviewed this and entered into this same agreement with Highlands Engineering a few months ago. So we were wanting to renew this agreement with KLJ. It'll put it on an even year now. We'll do it in 2018. We've made these typically 2-year agreements, and these agreements don't engage KLJ to do any work for the city. They don't make any financial obligations upon the city. Those come through separate individual task orders for projects. So this just lays the framework for each task order that we would potentially hire an engineering firm to do work for the city. So staff has reviewed the agreement, and we would recommend approval. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Kubis? Hearing no questions,
Mr. President, I'd move we approve the KLJ Master Service Agreement Task Order.
Second.
motion to approve with a second. Any further discussion or questions? Now we'll vote. Mr. Steiner.
Aye.
Mr. Altman.
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Task order is approved. We have a few minutes. We have a bid, 2018 sidewalk program. Mr. Kubis?
Thank you again, President Decker and Commissioners. Last week on April 11th, we had bid the 2018 sidewalk program. We've talked about this quite a bit, that we want to increase this program to create more connectivity with our sidewalks in town. So this year we've upped our budget, and we received 2 bids for the project. The first bid was from Two's Construction in the amount of $147,425. And the other bid was received from Wind Construction in the amount of $139,605. Staff has reviewed the bids, and we would recommend entering into a contract with Wind Construction. With that, I'd open it up to any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Kubis?
Sort of, Craig, did we just give them a quantity and had them bid it each? Is that how we do it, or?
Correct. Based on the numbers that we got last year, we don't bid a project per se, we bid quantities of work. So much 4-inch sidewalk, so much rebar, so much curb and gutter. And we try and target, the amount of work that we'd like to get done. Both of these bids obviously were very close, and hopefully, we'll max out our budget, because what we've decided in previous meetings is that we want to tackle a lot of city sidewalk. And we found out that we have more than $139,000 worth of city sidewalk to do. So we'll have plenty of work to do with this, but there is no particular block or street or property that we intend to do. We have kind of a targeted dollar amount, and we'll take our little bit and stretch it as far as we can.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing no other questions, I'd look for a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
with a second. Any further discussion or questions for Mr. Kubis? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The bid is approved. We have a 5:05 timetable, Community Foundation presentation. Mr. Sellinger.
Hi there, Commission. I've got with me John Heinen. He is the Western North Dakota Development Director for the North Dakota Community Foundation. He helps out our Dickinson Area Community Foundation. I'm going to let him talk for a few minutes, and then I'll follow up with a little bit more details to the Dickinson Area Community Foundation. But I do have some packets here that I'd like to pass out if that's all right with everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us speak. North Dakota Community Foundation, for those of you who don't know who we are, we're a 501c3, independently run nonprofit out of Bismarck. Our central office is out of Bismarck, North Dakota. We currently oversee 600 charitable funds for the state of North Dakota. And we were originally founded by past Governor Bill Guy and a group of bankers who wanted to make sure that there were charitable services available at a reasonable price, and having those services available, offering those services at the whole gamut of services, if you will, to citizens of North Dakota. 2.5 years ago, we set up an office here in Dickinson because we realized that there's a lot more need in the charitable world than we were serving out of Bismarck, and with a part-time employee that was covering this area. Our main mission is to provide charitable giving solutions to a few different entities, but primarily focused on donors. If donors have questions about how to give, what to give, or they want to give to their favorite charity but don't know how or in what manner, what type of asset, those kind of things. Oftentimes they'll call us with suggestions or they'll ask us for help. 501c3s, charitable entities, also ask us for help. Some of them that you might know that are better known, United Way of Dickinson just recently set up an endowment with us, which we're helping oversee. Badland Ministries, Able Inc., and many more. One of the probably the better known donors or scholarships that were set up a few years back was the Springer Scholarship, which now provides $34,000 to both Trinity and Dickinson High School graduating seniors, and there's a fund of about almost $1.5 million now. We also work with political subdivisions. So Parks and Rec is a big group or entities that we'll work with. Here in Dickinson, we've done that a little bit, and Jordan will expand on that, but also in Killdeer with the Cowboy Complex, the Saddle Club, and other projects like that. Even with the Tornado Relief Fund that was established by a group of concerned citizens, they used us as the back office to manage and hold those dollars, and then help with the granting of those back into the community to make sure that they were granted fairly and to the greatest needs. So we worked with city officials there to make sure that whole process happened. So as I mentioned, we have 600 charitable funds. One of the funds within that umbrella is the Dickinson Area Community Foundation, and so I'll have Jordan explain that a little bit more.
Thank you. So I'm currently the president of the Dickinson Area Community Foundation, and the Dickinson Area Community Foundation was established in 2016, so we're relatively young. As John mentioned, the North Dakota Community Foundation has 500 or about 600 more community foundations similar to Dickinson, but specific to the individual cities around the state. So at this point, we are relatively young, but last year in our first year of granting out or providing grants, we were able to grant out $7,000 worth of benefits to the area. $5,500 went to Community Action Partnership here in Dickinson to help with their car seat fund, and then $1,500 went to DSU's Women's Voices program. So we are gaining some momentum in our own grants and being able to help the community, because that's our entire portion here. We have a board of, I think, eight or nine members right now, and we all kind of have that same goal as, hey, we want to help our community in any way that we can. We want to help continue to make it better and kind of alleviate some of the burden from other groups, such as the city commission. And in doing that, we're able to partner with area people to help facilitate their own goals, their own project that they have within the city of Dickinson. One example of that is the Friendship Park. About a year ago, a family group came up, or a parent group came up to me and decided, hey, we want this inclusive playground to be built in Dickinson, similar to the one that Mandan has built. And so we've been working with them to provide the back office support, to provide help in writing their grants, to provide the support and maintenance of the fund, so that they don't have to have their own 501c3 and they can focus just on getting the park built and getting funds raised for that. Another example that we have that's been created in the last 6 months is there's a man by the name of Greg Pruitt that lives here in Dickinson, and he came to me, and he was my old basketball coach. He's the coach for South Hart, or Hart River now. But he came to me and said, hey, I want to start and help leave my legacy, and in doing that, I want to create what's called the Little Buddy Foundation. And unfortunately, we've gone through so many brochures that I don't have enough for all of you, but I do have a few that I'll give out. But basically, his whole idea is that he's donating his coaching check every year and hoping that other people will help him build his fund to help provide prosthetics to kids in the area. And while there may not be that many around the Dickinson area, but we're looking statewide to see who we can benefit with Greg's dollars and the dollars that he helps build or helps obtain. So there's different ways that we can help people out in Dickinson, and it's all working towards that goal of, hey, how can we make Dickinson an even better place? I was fortunate enough to grow up in Dickinson, and the joy I experienced in growing up there is part of what led me back, along with my family, and I want to raise my own family here. That's my purpose in being a part of this, is trying to help make a better community for the next generation. So if you have any questions or think of anything that might help us out or help us help the community, we'd love to hear from you, and as we work together to make Dickinson even better. So if you have any questions for either me or John?
Any questions for the gentleman?
So you are working in conjunction with the Dickinson Parks and Recreation?
Yep. So we partnered with not only with the Friendship Park Parent Committee, but also with the Dickinson Parks and Rec. They've been able to provide some land and some initial cash to help build that fund to build the park.
They'll be a good fit for you then.
Yeah.
That's what you should be.
Yeah, they're pretty excited, and we're pretty excited to have them on board. I think it's going to be a pretty good partnership, and obviously is going to result in a pretty great park for our city. So,
Where will the park be located?
so it hasn't been officially approved yet, has it? We're looking at it being off of Gum Avenue by the 10th Street overpass. That's what it's looking like is going to be where it's at. I don't think it's been officially approved yet, though, so I can't say for certain.
Okay.
We're getting there.
All right.
It's all part of the process. So, any other questions?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for having us.
We have our last timetable item, and that is a conditional use permit for Armstrong Oil Well. We have a representative here, Mr. Claris from Armstrong Corp.
Mr. President, I could
Okay.
lead off.
Some background? Okay.
Sure. We did receive an application to drill an oil well from Armstrong Corporation. And per our code, that they need to apply for a conditional use permit within either Dickinson or the zoning jurisdiction of Dickinson, in this case in the ETZ. This well on the map that you see is in a subdivision called the Dickinson Industries subdivision. I wasn't familiar with that name, but it's commonly referred to as the West Industrial Park within the ETZ of the city of Dickinson. And per our code, this would need to be heard as a timetable agenda and requires a public hearing. We've sent out notices to all the occupied buildings within 1,000 feet of the site. The applicant had previously sent out notices to all occupied dwellings within 1,000 feet of the site per the state code. So we have a slightly larger list than what the state requires. In your packet, you have the application they'd sent to the city, the meeting minutes that we had held, because also per our code, we have a meeting with our energy committee to discuss the application of Armstrong Corporation in this case. And so we have those meeting minutes included in the packet. The letter that we had sent out to all those occupied owners or occupied structures within 1,000 feet. And when we met as our energy committee, we had made the recommendation to approve this well site conditional to the previously applied conditions that the state had put on this permit. And that's also a part of your packet. It's a front and back, one letter permit from the state outlining some additional conditions that they've applied to this permit due to its proximity to buildings and residences. So with that, I turn it over to Mr. Claris to further describe the project for the commission.
Evening. I guess I mean, Craig did a great job as far as what we're doing. I mean, simply, we are proposing an oil and gas well site, West Industrial Park, on the current CHS property, GTA, just for visual, large grain elevator on the southern end of the big circle there. Just a little thought process going into the location of this well site. Some of you may be familiar with, but there was a previous well site there many years ago. I think it was finally plugged and abandoned in 2012. It was my goal to, I mean, looking at this area, you know, proximity to houses. I mean, we've got a fairly small target of where we're trying to get to. In fact, we are drilling directionally with this well to the north, about 4 degrees. You know, there really wasn't a great spot where I could hide this thing. So that said, I looked at this previous well site and trying to repurpose an old well site. That was the reasoning for my pick of this location. We are planning, obviously, if we obtain our permit with you folks, we're going to hopefully get in there and drill sometime, you know, as soon as frost laws come off and we can get in there and actually build a location. We will hopefully get in there, you know, mid-June, late June. Drill should be a fairly short process. If we're successful, of course, that process will continue for a few extra days. And then, obviously, it'll take some time to put the facilities together. And like I said, so grand total process, if we are successful, I suspect we'd be up and running in, you know, less than 30 days or thereabouts. So the actual drill process will take about probably 10 to 11 days. And then, prior to that, it'd be it's actually gonna be a fairly simple build. There's a current fence around that property, which we're gonna expand this thing. But the grade is fairly flat, so there'll be minimal construction. And we do have some stipulations from the state on how this location is going to be built, as you can see in the permit. Like I said, fairly simple process for us, but if you have questions, I'm willing to take them.
Any questions for Mr. Claris?
Mr. Claris, I have a couple of questions. So it's going to be a horizontal well?
It's actually directional. Like I said, our bottom hole is not beneath that
Directional,
little red
okay.
square. We're gonna be,
4 degrees, is
yeah,
that?
4 degrees to the north, small directional.
Once it's completed, how's the oil gonna be transported? Trucking or
Well, initially, yes. I mean, we expect that.
initially, yes, or?
Initially, yes, we will truck that oil. I mean, we'll try to get it online as fast as possible, but,
When you say initially,
Yes.
how long would you?
well, as quick as we can get a pipeline into it, so we can actually set up a LAC unit, so it can actually be transported basically automatically. As tank levels fill up, it'll transport down the pipeline.
But you don't know how long until you get the
Well,
trucks
no, I
out
mean,
of
that's,
there, and-
yeah. I
And
mean,
how
it's-
many trucks per day? I mean,
Well, I suspect it could be at least a truck a day, for sure a truck a day. And we're gonna have some limitations. You know, the state, we're required within, if we're successful, within 30 days of actually producing the well, we'll have to go back to the state, the NDSE, and have a hearing, and they'll set some limits as far as production levels. So I suspect they probably limit us in that 200 to 300 barrel a day amount until we can capture all the gas, put it on pipeline, so on and so forth. And that's gonna be the big deal with them, is capturing the gas.
Mr. Kubis, is that road gonna be rated for industrial use?
Commissioner Steiner, these roads are really outside our jurisdiction. We did discuss access roads with the applicant, and they'll be using GTA Drive out to Highway 10. And so both of those roads would be under the county's jurisdiction. I believe Mr. Claris had talked with the road superintendent for Stark County. So they'll be going through the existing industrial park out to Highway 10, but not really on city roads. So I can't speak to their load rating, quote unquote, but that they're obviously designed to handle some truck traffic already.
So you're gonna have a 30-day possibly drilling timeline?
Well, 10-day drilling
Hopefully.
timeline, yeah.
Okay. Once you put a pump on it, is that gonna be an electric pump?
Well, I mean, with this particular formation, we are targeting the lodgepole formation. So initially, I mean, if all things go the way they're supposed to go here, we expect that well to flow. So there will not be a pumping unit on it. But in the event, which eventually there will be a pumping unit on it, that's hopefully many years down the road. But like I said,
So
with the previous location.
No noise once you?
Yeah, as far as that goes, when the well is flowing, I mean, it's just tanks and a wellhead, and you can't hear the well flow, okay? You know, much like our Patterson Lake unit, which is right by the golf course, that flowed for 9 years before we had to actually put it on a pump. But to answer your question, yes, it would be electric. There's actually facilities for that. The previous pump, or previous well site had electricity there, so, you know, we're already.
Have you visited with all the people that are encased in that direction?
Excuse me?
Have you visited with the neighborhood people?
I gave notice to everybody that was within the boundaries that the state
Notice,
asked me.
But you didn't meet with them? And,
No.
And answer their
I
questions
took a few
or
calls
whatever?
from some folks along 114th Avenue.
Because I got a feeling they're gonna have some questions for you too. You know, we have approved these in the past in the community. And they've worked out okay. But we still gotta listen to the concerns of the residents there, and they have some concerns, how can we take care of that for them? So,
When was the original well drilled? The old well?
It was like I think it was right around 97, 98.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Claris? Thank you.
Yes.
We will open it up for the public hearing. If there's anyone from the public that wishes to come forward, have any concerns, comments, please come forward. Seeing no one from the public, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, any other questions for Mr. Claris or Mr. Kubis? If not, I'd look for a motion.
Just a comment, I mean, For me, I do have some concerns with locating something like this in a very busy industrial park. I mean, we have Baker Boy out there that has quite a few employees. You've got Industrial Electric, it's got a brand new facility right there within 600 feet, less, or maybe less than that.
I know it's not unique, because
I do have some concerns of, I mean,
I can go through the experience. Now, we have the one up north, and then the one right on the bypass here that, you know, we had the same concerns, and one was the noise, and they went in and drilled or re-drilled, whatever. And the noise went away, and today they're building homes around there. So I didn't hear anybody speak out against it. I hope you answered their questions. Maybe they feel a little bit better about it now. It'd be nice if you could get it done in 30 days, so you'd get out of there and you don't hear the oil flowing. Everybody in the community of Dickinson has, I don't want to say suffered some way, but have given up something for the oil industry in this community. You know, none of us have been outside of it. We've all had it affect us in some way. You know, I think with the fact that you know, many years there won't be a pumper there or whatever, that type of thing. If you can get the pipeline in there where you get rid of that one truck or two trucks a day, get it in and out of there. You know, I feel comfortable approving this for my sake.
maybe,
For my concern.
yeah. Mr. Claris, maybe, do you have any idea where the pipeline would come from, if that would get hooked up?
Well, there is actually production in the area. I mean, as you well know, that you know, this is on the border of Eland Field. I mean, you've got wells to the west, and of course, there's quite a few wells. I suspect at some point, I mean, it would probably try to come down GTA Drive, or, you know, I'd have to go take a really hard look at Belle Fourche pipeline system. But I mean, ultimately, I mean, there was an old well site, and I'm not 100% sure if it at one point that well, the original well, was making enough volume to actually have a pipeline in there. At this point, like I said, there is, and as gas is also a concern. You know, so neither one of them are next door here, but it's in the area. It's not like I have to get it from 20 miles from here. I mean, it's like I would say, like I said, we expect this well, if it's quantities that we think it can actually achieve, I mean, it'll be a very, you know, it'll be a full court press to try to get both pipeline for both gas and oil immediately. So as far as where it comes in, like I said, it's in the area, and I imagine that we'd probably have to come, you know, maybe from down GTA Drive, possibly. I think there's actually a pipe in the ditch along Highway 10, and so I mean, it's totally possible to get done.
So again, your trucking will come in from the north to the south on the east side of the facility?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any further questions for Mr. Claris?
No.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Kubis? Not, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve with a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Conditional use permit is approved. That is the last of our timetable agenda. We'll move back to Mr. Kubis. We have the 2018 mill and overlay.
Thank you, President Decker and Commissioners. Item C was another bid letting that was held last week for our 2018 mill and overlay project. We had opened those bids on Thursday, and we only received one bid, and that bid was from Northern Improvement Company in the amount of $1,199,837. Our engineer's estimate was $1.14 million. So we were about 5.2% over our engineer's estimate with this bid. That being said, this has been, I would say, fairly typical of our mill and overlay program for the last decade or more. We've gotten one bidder. It's been right at or above our engineer's estimate. So with that being said, we would recommend approval of the bid to Northern Improvement, and I can try and answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Kubis, the information that's on this slide is different than the information we have. Up there is 1.14, basically 1,140,000. What we have here as an engineer's estimate is 1,400,000.
Well, the engineer's estimate was $1.14 million.
So
It's the bid amount is correct. The engineer's estimate was 1.14 million.
So we're about 59,000 off.
Correct. Yeah, I didn't do the subtraction, but it was 5%, roughly,
Yeah.
5.2%.
About 50, yeah, about 60,000 actually.
questions for Mr. Kubis?
I would imagine in accepting this, we have the funds set aside somewhere that, I mean, it's out of the 1% or.
Correct. It
Right.
all comes out of the 50% of the 1%, all being the mill and overlay, all the street patching that we've already started on, and our seal coat project that's bid next month. So what we've done in the past is we've kind of kept this as a fluid project. On this one, we do have an exact neighborhood layout, and it's north of the project we did last year, starting at right on 6th Street up to 9th Street between Highway 22 and 4th Avenue East. So we have the neighborhood picked out. That being said, if we find we're running tight on budget, we can pull a block, remove a block, add a block if the budget looks better. But so we keep some flexibility in this project, understanding that potholes this year, for instance, might cost a lot more than in other years. So.
We have a few.
I've only heard of one, but.
Any other questions for Mr. Kubis on this bid?
Well, without a competing bid, I think 5% of our engineer's estimate, I'm okay with that. If you need a motion to approve, I would still make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the mill and overlay.
Second.
In a second. Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Mill and overlay is approved. I see Ms. Buck is here. Am I correct? Our 5 o'clock timetable, Sheree Buck is here if you want to come up.
And President Decker, I'd like to just introduce her.
Okay.
And this is Sherry Buck, and she is the Senator Hovind's Western Dakota Director. Sherry has been in this position since November of 2017, and her office is located in Watford City. And with that, I'll leave it to you, Sherry.
Thank you, Linda. I apologize for my lateness. I was on a conference call, and then as I'm learning about North Dakota, it seems to want to snow all the time. So. Mayor, I'm honored to be here with you tonight. I've been able to meet with you several times, and I'm very impressed with what you and your commissioners have done in the city of Dickinson. And just a little background, I was a mayor in the city of North Las Vegas and a city council person, and we went through extreme growth and then an extreme downturn, and which is one of the reasons we ended up in North Dakota. I decided I wanted to live with my husband, and he came to Watford City, and I absolutely love North Dakota. I went to work at McKenzie County Planning and Zoning and had the opportunity to read Mr. Hadley's words and works from starting zoning from scratch in a county that had commissioners that didn't even want zoning, correct, and kind of fought against that. And I admire Mr. Hadley greatly for what he did there, and I think you're very lucky to have him here as you move forward with your great explosion. What a wonderful place Dickinson is, and will continue to grow and be a beautiful city in the future. I've been working for Senator Hoeven since November. I'm the shorter John Cameron, if you knew Mr. Cameron. And the senator sends his best regards. He was just in your city, I guess a week or two ago. We had a roundtable at Dickinson State University, and we're very well treated in the city, and he wishes he could have stayed for your downtown tour, which I understand was very successful and went very well. So I'm here tonight just to introduce myself, to say hello, to give you my contact information, and let you know that that the senator is here to help you with whatever you need on a federal level, and I'm here to help you if in any way that I might be able to. I'm at your service. So thank you for letting me come tonight. I again apologize for being late.
Any questions for Mrs. Buck?
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, thank you.
Welcome
you
to
so
Western
much.
North Dakota.
Thank you very much.
It'll warm up for a day. So.
Thank you.
Okay, we are on to an Apex tax order, excuse me.
Thank you,
Mr. Kupis.
President Decker and Commissioners. There's actually two task orders here, both with Apex. The first one is for general planning and modeling. Again, this is a standing task order that we have had with Apex for many years. So this would be an amendment to that, just basically extending the time period out of the task order. And so this general planning and modeling are things like we get requests from different departments within the city saying, geez, do we have sewer capacity here? So we do we hire Apex to do those individual planning and small modeling projects. Again, this similar to the KLJ task order, or master service task order, this wouldn't necessarily bind the city to any agreement. We enter into those on a project-specific basis. And typically these come out of our general fund budget, out of the engineering department for contracted labor. They also do some modeling if we have a big subdivision that might be proposed. We could model to see if there's sewer capacity available. We don't do this nearly as much as we used to when there was massive subdivisions being proposed and we knew we were deficient in some areas. So now we've filled a lot of those gaps in with infrastructure projects already. So it's fewer and further between that we have to engage Apex to do these planning and modeling. But we do feel comfortable having the task order available to us to engage them quickly to get that work done for us. So staff has reviewed this task order amendment and would recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Kupis. Any questions?
Mr. President, I move we approve the Apex task orders.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second, and we'll have to vote on these each separately. Am I correct, Mr. Kupis?
Yes.
Okay. So for the general planning and modeling services, we have a motion to approve with a second. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. General planning and modeling services amendment is approved. And Mr. Kupis, this is on call, right?
Thank you. Yes, this is for on-call plan review services. Typically, we use this for projects that we get in submitted to the city that either require some technical software that we don't have, or just technical expertise we don't have on staff. Much of the time, this is reimbursed to the city through developer-paid fees, where we engage our consultants and turn that cost over to the developers for the review. It's very similar to the general planning and modeling task order, except that we have a different line item budgeted line item that it comes out of. Again, it's a general fund engineering budgeted item that we call engineering fees. So again, we've reviewed this amendment to the task order and would recommend approval.
Any questions on the on-call amended task order for Mr. Kupas?
Make a motion to approve?
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
With a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Task order amendment is approved. Next item up, we have a report, a FEMA Community Rating System update. Deputy City Engineer Marshak.
Good evening, President Decker, Commissioners. Just a brief report here. Last year, we submitted some documentation for things we already do within the NFIP program of FEMA in order to gain entry into the community rating system. And by being a part of this system, we get a 5% discount in the premium cost of flood insurance. Anyone that would apply or purchase insurance or get a new policy after May 1st will be eligible for that 5% discount. So we aren't doing anything too out of the ordinary to get this discount. Within the program, you can do some added things as a community, which gets you a higher rating, which gets you a bigger percentage, but we don't have that many residents within the community that actually are required to purchase flood insurance. So we just wanted to use what we are already doing and get this discount. So we got the letter this week that as of May 1st, we're in the group. Do you have any questions?
Great. Any questions?
Yep. In the letter, it states that that discount won't be available for the preferred risk policies in the zones B, C, and X. But the standard rated flood policies in zones B, C, X, D, and then it goes to A99, which I believe about got to be 90+% of what the properties along our flood ditch would be, right? Zone A.
Really, I think it's probably more of a form letter. We don't have that much designation within our community. Most of our areas are either X or Zone A, and some of those are not determined. We don't have any base
Good percentage
flood.
is Zone A, so.
Yeah.
You know, here they're talking, if I'm reading it right, they could qualify up to a 10%.
Correct. That's how I read
in
it.
Class 1 through 6.
But I don't know that we have anybody that fits that group.
Okay.
But I don't sell insurance, so I can't answer that part.
I don't either. It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Anything
Right.
else?
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to planning. And we have a public hearing on zoning text amendment to Chapter 39, Downtown and Commercial Zoning District Changes. City Planner Josephson.
Good evening, Commissioner. Steve Josephson. This is the second reading of the ordinance that went to you a couple weeks ago. These are changes to the downtown commercial zoning district. There were no changes made to this since the first reading, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Josephson?
Make a motion to approve second reading and final passage of ordinance 1650.
We have a motion to approve the second and reading and final passage of 1650, and Mr. Steiner, were you going to second it?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Steiner seconds. Any further discussion or questions? And we did, I know it on our sheet it says public hearing, but we held a public hearing.
There was a time
Yeah.
certain one 2 weeks ago.
Yes. So, okay. So, we have a motion to approve second. Any further discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you very much.
1650 is passed. Next up, we have the landscaping and screening standards. Planning Director Hadley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, this would be the second reading also of ordinance 1651. We heard this 2 weeks ago as well. Second reading, there hasn't been any changes or modifications or public comments on this, and staff would recommend approval of ordinance 1651.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. Any questions for Mr. Hadley on 1651?
Just a few comments. I mean, since this went through the last meeting, I have had a few people comment that they think, you know, compliance would be better if we just allowed them to plant the trees anywhere they want in their yard instead of requiring in the front yard or the side yard. And then, you know, with that, it goes back to this, we talked about this, not change order, correction notice that we'd be giving at closing of their house. If they didn't have it done, giving them a time. So then I researched, you know, the violation and penalties. And the fine can be between, you know, $50 and $500 max. But that can, each day can be continued at deemed a separate offense. So it could be up to $500 a day we could be billing somebody for not putting these trees in. But then that gives them the right to also go to the judge and fight it. So then we got a compliance issue. I mean, again, how much?
I think we have two problems. I agree with you on the first problem on what we're requiring here. I mentioned it. I don't think we should be requiring people to plant a tree if they don't want to plant a tree. Get up to the age where you don't want to mess with trees and the mess that they produce. You shouldn't have to if you're trying to build a new home, that type of thing. The second was we definitely have to correct that fine up to where it can be $5 for additional day for not planting a tree. It's kind of ridiculous. One of these that.
It falls into that violation. That would be, you know, minimum of $50 up to $500, and each day that a violation continues shall be deemed a separate offense. So that could be $500 a day for 30 days or 2 months, or, and then if they pay that one and they get violated again, then it's actually a misdemeanor, which is a fine up to $1,000, up to 30 days in jail. I mean, this is.
I agree, that's got to be changed.
You know where I stand.
If they want to pay the $500 not plant a tree, we'll take the $500 and plant 10 trees somewhere else. That's what we want to do. But again, I don't think we should be telling people what they can and cannot. Oh, I think we can tell them what they cannot plant on there.
I would agree with, if we have certain standards, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Hadley, we have like NDSU plantable list of trees that are compatible with our region.
Yes, Mr. President, that's what we're using right now, and then as we hire a forester, they would be the keeper of that list, and we would add trees that were appropriate.
I just know, I've been driving around town quite a bit. There are whole sections of our city in violation of our ordinance that do not have trees in their front yard.
Wow.
Old parts of the city.
Well, and then there was a discussion that it's going to start from the day that we adopt this. So then basically it's going to only apply to people that have been building, not to anybody that's built previously, that we haven't forced them to do this yet. I don't know. I just think it's opening up a whole can of worms, and we're going to have somebody to like drive around. I don't know where I just don't know where it ends after, you know. And obviously the fine is something I would never get behind, you know, and how much time are we going to waste with Miss Murtha trying to prosecute somebody in front of city court over not planting a tree? I mean, if they decide not to do it, what are we going to do?
Another issue is we don't have a city forester at this time.
Hopefully.
Still
As Dominic said, hopefully. So, but I stated before, I don't believe we should be in the tree police business, that we need to have city staff driving around trying to find trees. I'm okay with requiring a certain amount of trees, and I know Mr. Steiner would argue that, hey, if he doesn't want to plant any trees, but I think there is some middle ground that we can come to, that we're not having to be tree police, that people can still
If
beautify
you're
their
70
yards.
years old and you build a
Right.
new home on a corner, and you're in a walker, and you're required to plant 3 trees, and in 5 years, you're 75, you want to go out and mess with those trees come fall, 75 years old.
If I put my contractor hat on, this ordinance is a lot better than it was. I don't have an issue with it,
I do with the fine. We have.
with the fine I have an issue with, the enforcement I have an issue with.
Right, I would, if you want to suggest, I suggest we approve it as is tonight, bring back the fine part of it, and look at some enforcement issues.
I mean, and I don't
Because
think
we
we,
got the spring
and
coming
I don't
up.
think we want to get to the point where if they don't do it, then we go plant a tree in the right of way. You know, we just go back in their driveway, plant a tree in the right of way. As the city, do we want to do that too? I mean, for most people, they might just pay the 500 and let it ride, see what happens.
There were some pretty good guys that chopped down a cherry tree at one time, it turned out to be pretty good.
Yeah. I don't know.
The ones in history class caught that.
I
can
know,
see.
you know, I know one thing, we don't want it tied to the CO. I know that for a fact, because that just causes another issue that we can't enforce either, so. Ms. Murtha, thoughts?
My only comments and observations were, as you noted, this is a change to an existing ordinance. So if this ordinance does not go through this evening, then the existing ordinance as it stands now will remain in full force and effect, which it does have increased. This is actually, the proposed changes reduce the number of trees that are required to be planted. So that will remain, the increased number of trees. The fine, as you mentioned, is the fine penalties aren't specific to the landscape, violations of the landscape ordinance. They are general fines and penalties. So if the commission would like to take a look at carving out a separate fine schedule for violations of the landscape ordinance, that can certainly be done. So it's just currently under a catch-all for the code. So I just bring that to your attention in seeking direction and how you would like to proceed on this issue.
I just know we've had other enforcement issues with bad yards and garbage, and it takes months and sometimes even years before anything ever happens. I mean, do we want to go down that road with trees and spend money with attorneys and in front of the judges? And you know, I mean, there's going to be people that are going to say, I'm just not going to do it, I'll take my chances. And then I just think I'm not against the amount, but I just think maybe you let them plant them wherever they want on their yard. Who cares? As long as they put in a tree.
Well, that was my argument from the get-go. If we're gonna have a certain amount, plant them where you want. So, but.
And I agree with, if we don't change it tonight, it's gonna go back to the crazy formula we've used for the last.
Well, if
many
we
years.
decide to table this, we can table this and come back with new language.
Yes.
But
you
well,
need some direction on the language.
Yes.
So, Mr. Altman, I have not heard your.
I don't have strong feelings on this, I guess, like you guys do. And so whatever you guys want to do is fine.
I would recommend, I'm okay with the number, I would just recommend that we change the language to, they can plant it on anywhere on their lot. They seem fit. And we need to do something about the enforcement.
We do.
The fines and the enforcement, I think, but.
Mr. Hadley, to Mr. Steiner's point, bushes count as trees, right?
No.
No.
No? No?
No.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say you could put up some.
It's gotta have a certain caliper
Oh, okay.
stem on it. Or, not
Every
stem.
inch in diameter.
Now we're gonna have a forester out there with a caliper. Oh,
Well, I know that part is not, we've been pretty lax on in the past, but There's never been one ordinance I think we've spent more time on than this.
I agree. Liquor license, but, you know.
Yeah.
Mr. President, if I could, the reason that we're revisiting that is to promote also the urban forestry program, which we're pretty heavily into and we've been into for 25 years now. So that's also the other side, the other balance of it is to continue to promote that program as well. So irregardless of where you'd like to plant it, I think that it is important if we want to continue that program.
Yeah, that was basically my argument from the get-go, was you can plant them anywhere you want on your property. You're still planting trees. I think there's people that, besides Mr. Steiner, that want to plant trees. The location, and I know I have been contacted by people that the old formula was just wrong. I mean, there's people with corner lots that have 7 trees down the side of their lot, and it makes no sense. So if we table this, amend the language to plant trees wherever, you still have to plant the trees, 3 of them, and then we come back and address these penalties, and that'll be a whole separate ordinance change. Right, Mrs. Murtha?
It can be.
Okay.
It can also be incorporated, and I believe you also have the flexibility, if you would like to remand, if you will, it back down to the Planning and Zoning Commission and start the process over again.
You're
So you
talking
have
this whole ordinance?
the whole ordinance. It's at your discretion.
I don't know if we want to send that back down to planning.
I'd be okay with that. I'd also like to see in there something that if people want to become involved with the buyout program, don't want to plant the trees, but we understand we want to be a tree city, forestry and so on. For $300, I want to opt out of this program. You take my $300, you buy trees, you plant them elsewhere. We solve both issues.
I don't see a problem with that either.
I don't either. Do we want this going back to planning and zoning?
I don't want it going back to planning and zoning, no.
I hate to mention this, but it was 1980 when I was appointed to the Forestry Committee. The first one, but I don't have a memory that goes back that far on why we would have done this here, except we were approached by the USA Tree Program to increase the forestry and the trees in the community. If you took away all the buildings in the community, we would have a nice little forest here. So to continue that is okay. To continue with someone that doesn't want a tree is kind of tough. So, throw out a motion.
Well, I think we're been over this enough. Why don't we, Mr. Hadley?
Mr. President, if I could make a recommendation, I would suggest maybe you table it and let Attorney Murtha and I work on a penalty and then also a verbiage on the 3 trees on corner lots, 1 tree on regular lots, and bring that back to you at the next meeting.
That'd be good. And bring up the buyout option too, that we can take a look at.
Okay.
I'd make that motion to table it then.
We have a motion to table the landscaping and screening standards ordinance 1651.
Second.
Any further discussion? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Ordinance 1651 is tabled. Mr. Hadley, we'll move into future land use amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This is ordinance 1652. It's a second reading also for 1796 South Main, which is Worthington and Great Lake subdivision. Future land use amendments from mixed use to industrial. This is obviously the second reading. You heard it 2 weeks ago. There hasn't been any changes or public comment on either one of these. And staff would recommend approval as written.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. Any questions or comments for Mr. Hadley on ordinance 1652? Not, I look for a motion.
Motion to approve second reading, final passage of ordinance 1652.
I have
Second.
a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. 1652, the second reading and final passage of ordinance 1652 is passed. Mr. Hadley, rezone petitions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Ordinance 1653, second reading. Number 2 and number 3 are the corresponding zone changes to the Flume amendments that you just heard and passed. The first item, state third edition, is a change to R2. All of these were heard 2 weeks ago. Second reading, there hasn't been any changes and no public comments on it. Staff would recommend approval of all 3 on ordinance 1653.
Any questions for Mr. Hadley on ordinance 1653? If not, I look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second?
We have a motion to approve, and a second to approve the second reading and final passage of ordinance 1653. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman? Aye. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Ordinance 1653 passes. We have nothing from building code and enforcement. Public issues of city concern not on the agenda. If you have any, please come forward. State your name.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Linda Steve, and I come as a concerned citizen of Dickinson. I'm probably one of the few people who reads all of the audit reports online, that sort of thing. But anyway, come because I want to strongly recommend that the city of Dickinson consider using Open Government, or OpenGov. It's a software program. I don't know if you've read about it. It's on yesterday's Bismarck Tribune, front page of the second section. City of Grand Forks already uses it. The city of Fargo already uses it. McKenzie County is implementing it within a couple of weeks, and Morton County is just going to implement it. It's basically putting your checkbook online so that it's very transparent, that people always know what's going on in the city. And Grand Forks and Fargo, one of the reasons they really like it is that they say it has really reduced the number of requests for the open records because it's now all online. So I don't have a clue what it costs. I don't know how it works, but it really intrigued me when I read about it in the Tribune, and I just really would like to suggest that the city of Dickinson consider it. So would you like me to give a copy of this to Mrs.
You can
Carlson?
give it to, yeah, Mrs. Carlson.
Thank you.
And the title of the program again?
OpenGov.
OpenGov, okay. Any questions for Ms. Steve?
No.
Anyone else from the public have any concerns within the city? Come forward, state your name. Seeing no one else from the city, we'll close the public issues section. We do have, before I ask the commissioners if they have any items, I have a letter of support on the commission agenda from our airport for the essential air. I was at the airport meeting last week, and we have the need to submit to the FAA basically our support of them, our Theodore Roosevelt Regional Airport staying on EAS. It's basically a subsidy from the government to keep United in Dickinson. So what I'm looking for is the consideration to approve the letter, and I'll forward it to our airport manager, and then he'll submit it with their paperwork.
Move to approve.
Second?
We have a motion to approve the letter of support for essential air service with a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Letter of support is passed. We are moving into, we have on our agenda an executive session item. So I would need a motion to move us to executive.
So move.
We have a motion to move to executive
Second.
session. Yes.
That the record reflect the basis for the executive session is for attorney consultation under 4404 19.1 and 4404 19.2 related to the MDU line relocation invoice.
What she said.
All in favor of moving to executive session?
Aye.
Aye.
The matter has been discussed, and it's my understanding that, Mr. President, the City Commission would like to proceed with an action.
That is correct. There is an invoice with an amount, Mr. Kubis.
The negotiated amount was $72,200.73.
$72,200.73.
Correct.
That is the new invoice from MDU. Commissioners, any further discussion on this item? If not, I would look for a motion to approve the payment of the MDU invoice.
Mr. President? Yes. I'll make a motion to approve the MDU invoice for $72,200.76.
73.
73 cents?
Second.
Okay, I think Mr. Steiner got you, beat you
All
on that
right.
one. All right.
We're good.
He's just quiet over there. So we have a motion to approve the payment of the MDU bill. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Invoice will be paid. Anything else, commissioners?
Mr. President, if I could just make just a note for the record that Commissioner Trustum joined in the executive session via telephone.
Okay,
And
thank
then
you.
just for the record.
Thank you. Anything else, commissioners? Look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
We're adjourned.